Chris McLeish. Here we are. What's this? Episode number 4.
4. This is the Quilogy.
Quilogy.
This is the 4th in the Quilogy.
Quilogy. We've already had this conversation. Quilogy is a much better word than quartet.
Yeah, I agree. How are you? How's things? What's happening?
I'm not bad. I'm okay. Muddling through, as per usual. How about yourself?
Yeah, I'm good. Been doing some work this afternoon and it's been very exciting. Hopefully some nice exciting things to talk about in the future.
That'd be very nice if there was some nice exciting things to talk about in the future. Hint, hint.
Wink, wink. We are still having excellent feedback from people, which is wonderful, and it is keeping us motivated to continue going and to keep this thing alive.
It is very true, because we do honestly appreciate it so much, and I was very, very pleased with the reactions to last week's episode, because out of the 3 we've done so far, that's my personal favourite, I think.
Yeah, I particularly enjoy talking of Scottish roots of an opera. That was cool. Really enjoyed that. Didn't expect that.
Thank you very much. I aim to please.
And also, out of my 4 murders,
yes.
I feel the story of Jess McPherson is one of my favourites.
Mm-hmm.
It's not to say that the last 2 will be rubbish.
No.
But
not at all.
It was a personal favourite.
If you're only joining us now and you're a new listener, firstly, hello, and secondly, the first 2 episodes are pretty good as well, as if I do say so myself.
Yes.
But
yes,
I mean, if
we don't want to peak at episode 3.
Exactly, but personal favourite so far. Just thought I'd put it out there.
Also, this week has been very exciting because the quartet of murders that I have been working on, the link between the 4 of them is getting more and more interesting. I'm finding more information about how there's teeny tiny little links between all of them. So I'm very excited to talk about that next week, because I've got my final part next week.
But also
means I then have to think of something else. Yeah.
One thing I have found is that each episode that we do record, we keep finding random links between stuff we've previously spoken about that should be completely unrelated. Yeah. Like the one I texted you about the other day, in that Christiana Brand, who wrote the Nurse Matilda books, which inspired Emma Thompson to write the Nanny McPhee films. And for anyone who doesn't know or hasn't listened to episode 1, this is your final call. One of my first introductions to Gothic horror was seeing a poster for a Gothic horror film, going to see Nanny McPhee, and the writer of those books wrote up her own book on the Sandiford murder case.
See, it's all coming together.
How weird is that?
All the planets are in alignment right now for our podcast.
Yeah, it's really, really bizarre. It was very weird. And as soon as I read that, I can't even remember how it came up. I think I was Googling something about the Sandiford murder, and then that just happened to come up that she'd written a book about it. I was like, are you kidding me? Of all the things a kids writer could write about, it was a gruesome murder. One thing that I have received some nice feedback about is that people quite like our random questions that we've inadvertently started asking at the start of each episode, which we generally just kind of asked because we just like talking rubbish at the start of an episode. But I thought, why not turn this into a little segment? So, you ready for this? I've got a prop and everything.
Yes.
I've got a prop and everything.
I'm excited.
They can't see it, but you can see it.
I can.
You can see that. So I give you the magical cloche hat of destiny.
Ooh, I do love a hat of destiny.
Exactly. We had to get it in there. Now, this is the hat for anyone that's interested. It's a vintage style 1930s cloche hat. But this is the hat that I used for our film club titles.
Yay!
So, Michael, if you're listening, I'm reusing the magical hat.
This was for you, Michael.
So, in here, I've got some random questions. Some are about musical theatre, since we do like talking about that. Some are about a film, kind of. And some are sort of general kind of stupid get-to-know-you type questions.
Getting to know you.
Yeah. But, like, none of this, like, get-to-know-you nonsense, like, tell us a fun fact about yourself, which is my, like, pet hate.
I hate when you start a new production and you have to come up with some silly, strange fact.
I hate it so much. Oh my God, I can't even, because the minute someone says that to me, I'm just like, I'm not an interesting person. I have nothing to tell you.
Well, no, my issue is that people say, okay, so when it gets to you, just say your name, which character you're playing, and a fun fact about yourself. And by the time it comes to me, I've forgotten my own name. I don't know what my history is, and I don't know why I'm there. And I honestly couldn't tell you.
What am I doing?
I just walked in here. That's how it feels.
Yeah. And because in the very small handful of productions that I have directed thus far, I've specifically made a point of not doing that. Let's get to know each other. I kind of like just going straight in. Like, we know why we're all here. We know who we all are. Let's just go straight in and get to work, because...
Yeah, get to know each other by working with each other.
Exactly. So, I shall pick as our first random question out of the magical hat.
Please do.
So we've got a kind of filmy / get to know you question. And what's your favourite obscure Disney film?
Oh.
So by obscure, I'm meaning like one that's is kind of either forgotten about, or one that you don't feel is like as acclaimed as it should be, or one that you just enjoyed that nobody else kind of like knows about.
Okay. Well, okay. So we all know, I mean, people might not know this, but you should know it sooner than later, that I am Hocus Pocus's biggest fan.
Oh, it's taken us 4 episodes before we mentioned this.
I know, I'm quite impressed by myself, because most conversations I have are about Hocus Pocus, to be honest.
I know, the fact it hasn't come up is impressive, let's be honest here.
I go to the doctors and like, what's up with you? And I'm like, well, I just feel like I've not watched Hocus Pocus enough this year, and it's really having an effect on my health.
Yeah.
No, I feel like it is a very popular film, though. I do feel it's a cult classic. People who watch it love it. And so I don't necessarily think it would count as being quite obscure.
Well, I think it could, because I would argue that it has only very recently made a resurgence.
Yeah, potentially. But then the answer to any question to do with film, be it, what's your favourite film?
Mm-hmm.
Which film would you like to have been in?
Mm-hmm.
Which film was your first ever kind of gothic film?
Yes.
It will always be Hocus Pocus. Hocus Pocus is the answer to all of these questions.
It's a strong answer. It's a good answer.
Thank you. I do also like things like Black Cauldron. I feel like it's quite underappreciated.
Oh God, that is possibly one of the most stressful kids' films I've ever... Remember we did...
The Squealing Pig.
Oh. Mm-hmm. That night we did the 3 of us did like the viewing of it. It was so stressful. The fact that was made for kids.
It was also meant to be much, much darker than it actually turned out to be.
Yeah.
It was meant to... I think Tim Burton was meant to work on it originally, and he wanted it to be really dark.
I mean, that does not surprise me.
He got taken off the project, and that never happened. But it was the first Disney film to use a combination of computer-generated effects and the original hand-drawn style of Disney films. It was the first film to do that. So it was a film for firsts. There's a couple of other firsts that I can't remember.
Mm-hmm.
That was one that I do remember.
That's very cool.
What about yourself? What's your favourite obscure Disney movie?
Right. Again, somehow, strangely enough, still in the kind of like gothic horror realm.
It has to be.
But my favourite obscure Disney film is The Haunted Mansion. So it was, was it 2003 it was released, I think? So starting with Pirates of the Caribbean, there was this whole like resurgence of like Disney adapting their theme park rides. So obviously starting with Pirates of the Caribbean, and Haunted Mansion came out round about the same time. So I think it must have been about 2003. But I just I just love that. It's one of those films I can just watch over and over and over and just never get tired of it, because it's got a very good cast for being because it was like released in cinemas and stuff, but I don't think it did particularly well at the box office, and I don't think it was I don't think it went down particularly well critically either. But it had Eddie Murphy, it has Terence Stamp, like hello. He's like acting royalty.
He was the baddie, wasn't he?
Yeah, he plays the butler. And can we just take a moment to appreciate Nathaniel Parker as Master Edward Gracie in the Haunted Mansion? Because I had a crush on him when I was like 9 years old, and I still do now at 25.
Fair enough.
He is lovely.
I can relate. Let's go back to Hocus Pocus for a second.
Yeah.
Thackeray Binks.
Oh,
Excuse
yes.
me. I love that cat. Although, a fun fact about Hocus de Pocus is that the character of Thackeray Binks was voiced by a person who was not the person who appeared on the screen. So Sean Murray, is his name Sean Murray? I was just about to say that, rolling off my tongue. No idea if that is his name.
There's something about that name that sounds right. So also I'd be surprised.
It was right. Woohoo!
I would have been very surprised if you'd got it wrong.
Yes, well, Sean Murray was the visual human Thackeray Binks.
Is that the one with the blonde hair?
The one with the blonde hair.
And the white floaty shirt.
But the voice was an entirely different actor.
As one does.
And I can't remember if I read it was because of the voice of the cat then didn't match well enough, so they just dubbed the entire thing. Can't remember.
Would you like to know my favourite fun fact about the Haunted Mansion?
Yes.
So, I'd like to point out, firstly, that the Haunted Mansion is actually an incredibly well-made film. Like, the production values on it are friggin' great. It looks so good. And also, shout out to the king of special effects makeup, Rick Baker, who did the, spoiler alert, zombie makeup on it. Brilliant. Terrifying for a kid's film.
Yeah.
But
love that scene.
It's so good. But my favourite fact is, so on the ride at the various Disney parks throughout the world, the theme song for the Haunted Mansion is a song called Grim Grinning Ghosts. And the composer of the Haunted Mansion film, the whole score is basically just an extended variation of the theme park ride theme tune. So if you listen very, very carefully, the whole thing is basically just that one tune, but played in various different styles and various different ways. And I absolutely love it. It's so good.
I love that. I feel like you may have told me that fact before, and I would appreciate if somewhere out there was a video analysing the whole thing, because I would 100% watch that. Because I would find that very interesting.
You've given me an idea.
Are you going to do it yourself?
I mean, it's been a while since I've done any music analysis, but I'll give it a go, because it's a very good score, and if it means I can just sit and listen 100%. To that consistently,
we know plenty of people.
I'll do it. That's very true.
Who would also?
That's very true.
Great. With this new segment, it would be cool if people want to email us their own responses for our own viewing pleasure. We may never talk about this again, but it would be cool to know what because if somebody comes up with something I've never seen, which is unlikely because, come on, I come from a Disney family, it'd be cool to go and watch it. So if people want to email us at aweebitgothic@gmail.com and tell us what your favourite obscure Disney movie is. That would be really fun for me.
That would be really fun. We could make a whole new viewing list, because we have exhausted our first one and we have since moved on to our second one.
Yeah, we are currently in the second list of films for our film party.
Exactly. So,
which is mostly my way of just getting you guys to watch films that I want to watch, because I come up with a fair chunk of the suggestions, and it's just like, I want to watch this movie.
I mean, it's a very, very clever way of doing it.
I'm nothing if not clever.
Exactly. I applaud your ingenuity in just forcing us to watch horror films that you want to watch, basically. I mean, it's an easy way to do it because we don't question it.
True. I mean, you've been falling for it so far.
Exactly. You're like, can we put this one in the list? And I'm like, yeah, let's just do it. Why not? And now I know.
Fabulous. Well, shall we fire in with our stories?
Should we move to story times? Are we wanting to go back to our original way this week? Do you want me to go first?
Okay, ladies, now let's get in formation. We don't have the copyright for that. I do believe you are first this week. I
am first this week. I will go first then. So,
fabulous.
The past couple of weeks, I've been talking about kind of like forms of art. I've gone down the story time route this week. A bit like yourself. And this is it's a slightly weird story. It's partly true crime, partly not, partly just a really weird, somewhat blackly funny tale, basically.
I'm into it.
So I hope you enjoy it. You might already know it because you're an East Coaster and you know all about your Scottish stories. So you might already know this. But I'm going to tell it anyway because this story was brought to my attention and it is a little bit tragic, but also it did make me laugh out loud because there is just something really weird. It's just a really weird story, basically. So this is the bizarre tale of Half Hang't Maggie.
Oh, now I don't know if I know this, but the name does sound familiar.
So it is quite a famous story, actually. Well, it wasn't to me because I didn't know about it. But in reading about it, it is quite well known. And there is various reasons as to why the story is still kind of in modern consciousness, if you like. There is a reason behind it. And I will also tell you why Maggie ended up with the nickname that she did. So
I love it.
So here we go. Maggie Dixon was born in Musselburgh around 1702. That's the thing about this story. There's not many concrete dates. There's just kind of like, we think this happened circa whenever.
That's because people didn't become literate in Scotland till the 70s.
I mean,
so nobody wrote this stuff down.
Do you know what? That's probably like a fair estimate, to be honest. Oh, God. Right. So she was born in 1702. She married a fisherman who subsequently deserted her in 1723 because, also, we're talking about like coincidences or repeated elements in our various stories so far. And a constant repeated one is that just men are trash.
They are. They only now are getting slightly better, and I think it's because social media is very good at shaming them.
Exactly. So,
and it's about time.
Like, we're not even 2 minutes into this story and some woman's already been abandoned. Like, goodness sake. Anyway,
poor lamb.
It's believed that he was either press-ganged into joining the Royal Navy or that he left to find work on a fishing fleet in Newcastle. So nobody quite knows what happened to him, but he left the scene either way. If he was press-ganged into joining the Navy, I will retract what I said about them being trash, but if he did abandon her to go and find work in Newcastle, I stick to what I said.
By work, does he mean lovely ladies? Who knows?
Who knows? I mean, maybe. Mm-hmm. Maybe. But anyway, Maggie...
We didn't have the rights for that.
No, we don't. Maggie, now husbandless, moved to Kelso in that same...
Lovely.
Yeah, in that same year. And she was working in an inn/pub in return for some basic lodgings. So she picked herself up and she's like, do you know what? I'm gonna get through this. I'm just gonna sort myself out here. She did for a while, but it is then believed that Maggie began a relationship with the innkeeper's son. Mm-hmm. And surprise, surprise, she subsequently fell pregnant with his child. So she's in a bit of a fix, is Maggie. So knowing that the pregnancy would most likely lead to her being shunned and dismissed immediately from her job and from the premises, she concealed the pregnancy for as long as she could and denied any rumours that came about her being with this child. And
okay.
I mean, it was 18th century, so even more so, like, illegitimate pregnancy, particularly in that era, was viewed as like a major immoral act, and discovery of such a pregnancy would lead to like certain eviction from her like lodgings. It would be the loss of the woman's job and her income. And, as I found out, women would even be brought before the Kirk elders and she would be named as a fornicator.
Grim.
Isn't that the most hideous title and also the most hideous word?
Yeah, it makes me think of like mastication. You know, like people, it makes me think of somebody chewing something.
Yeah.
Fornication.
It's like one of those words like that just, there's never, it's like, see when people say they were lovers, it just makes me feel vaguely uneasy. I don't like it.
It gives me the full body, the opposite of tingles.
Yeah. It's just
shingles. It gives me full body shingles.
Like, there's never a good enough excuse to use the word fornicator. Just put it out there.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't appeal.
No.
I was going to say though that if she has to conceal the pregnancy in this day and age that we're currently in terms of where she is,
yes,
the diet probably wasn't great. So bloating was maybe an issue. So people could conceal,
and also
with their bad diets.
I'm not a historical costumer, so I can't speak on from like fact. But you'd think as well, like if she was wearing a corset.
That baby's going to be squished.
Yeah. So like
it's going to come out looking like a sheet of 2-3 paper. No, 2D. No, never mind.
I knew what you meant, don't worry. I can't imagine it being much fun, shall we say.
No, I mean corsets would be uncomfortable at the best of times.
Yeah, corsets would be uncomfortable. And also as well, another thing is that if you go to like a museum or whatever and you see clothes from that time period, women were tiny. Like, everyone...
In stature or...
In both.
In width?
Both.
Oh, I see.
Like, we as humans have most definitely gone through a bit of evolution since then.
This brings me to a fun fact that I could share with you about the Titanic.
Okay, let's go for it.
So, yeah. So they wanted... When they made the 1997 film... Titanic, they wanted to make the structures as accurate as possible to what was actually in the real cruise liner.
Yeah.
But what they had to do was they had to take the original measurements that were used to build the Titanic and scale them up slightly for the film, because the average human would look unusually large if they'd kept it to the scale that they originally worked with.
Ah, what an excellent fun fact.
So between 1912 and 1997, already people evolved to be slightly larger, so they had to incorporate that into the building of the structures. How fun!
That's such a cool fact. I enjoyed that a lot. Excellent.
You are so welcome. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So after concealing the pregnancy, Maggie eventually gave birth, and the baby was born premature, and unfortunately...
Because she was shoving it down with a corset.
That is a possibility, yes.
Yeah, I shouldn't joke about that because that may be the case. Okay, carry on.
And because the baby was born premature, it did die. It's not known. Oh. I know. It's not known whether the baby was stillborn, died shortly after birth, or whether anything slightly more grotesque occurred.
I would like to retract my previous statement about being pushed down by a corset because I now feel sad.
That's fine.
I apologise.
You're forgiven. So Maggie was allegedly going to place the body of the child in the River Tweed, but she couldn't bring herself to place it in the water, and instead she just left the child's body on the riverbank. The child's body was discovered, and it was traced back to Maggie, and she was arrested and tried in Edinburgh.
I would like to know how they did the tracing. Sorry.
I don't know. I couldn't find much on it. It was very weird, actually. I couldn't find much on how they... Yeah. Found out about it, but anyway, so it's been debated that Maggie was originally charged under the Concealment of Pregnancy Act. The 1690, so we're going back a bit here, Scottish Act anent murthering of children directed juries to capitally convict women who had concealed their pregnancy and the birth of an illegitimate infant that had subsequently died, with or without direct evidence of murder. The onus was upon the mother to prove her innocence of the crime and that the child had been born dead.
How do you prove that?
Yeah, so this was like a pretty big crime. Like, and I mean, fair enough, because if someone is going around doing not a very nice thing to like newborn children, fair enough, but also it is quite tricky to prove that your child was not stillborn.
Yeah.
Particularly at that time and with how...
Yeah, no camcorders.
That's not where I was going, but yes, you make a point. In terms of kind of like medical science at that point was advancing, but not to the extent to which they could like prove. So basically, the mother had to stand in the dock and try and convince people that she did not murder her own child. So, fun fact for you, the Concealment of Pregnancy Act does still exist in law in Scotland.
Oh, lovely.
So, it was revised in 1809, And the sentence can be 2 years in prison if you're found to have concealed the birth of a child. And the Act was revised in 1809 to remove the penalty of death.
Oh, that's good.
That's good, because I mean we don't want that in the 21st century.
No.
It's
that would be far too extreme.
It's important that we protect children, but that's a bit extreme, that. Medical evidence presented at the trial suggested that the child had indeed been alive for a time, although it has been debated just how accurate this evidence was. Again, through medical science and how were they able to tell at the time. But subsequently, the charges against Maggie were upped from concealment of pregnancy to that of homicide. So it's really not looking good. Maggie was found guilty by, surprise, surprise, an all-male jury.
To be fair, that doesn't surprise me.
Exactly. It was the 1700s. Of course it was all men, because they knew better. She was subsequently sentenced to death. Maggie was hanged at a public execution in Edinburgh's Grassmarket on the 2nd of September 1724, and dates suggest...
3 days before my birthday.
Oh.
I'm so sorry.
There you go. How cool.
The second I hear my birthday, I have to shout out. That's like near my birthday.
I'm so sorry. You need to keep that.
Go back to your very serious.
You need to keep that in.
This is very serious. Get back to it.
Oh, God. So dates suggest that Maggie was perhaps only 22 at the time. A young girl.
Young.
Like, very young.
Yeah.
It's really horrible. And also, as well, one would presume if she was trying to conceal this pregnancy, I mean, I wouldn't have been surprised if she did, like, give birth to this child, potentially a stillborn child, which is traumatic, alone, and without any help. It's really awful. There was no sympathy. Grassmarket, which still exists in Edinburgh, was the known place for executions at this time. So it was a rare day out for all the family to see the criminals getting executed. What fun.
Absolutely. No Netflix. So
after the execution, a near riot occurred, would you believe? Yes. Both Maggie's friends and relatives and medical students from the university vied over who would claim ownership over her body.
Oh.
Yeah. So only the bodies of executed criminals could be used for dissection at the time, and increasing numbers of medical students at the university meant that a human cadaver was becoming quite the valuable commodity. And I'm sure further down the line in this podcast, we will come across perhaps the two most famous body snatchers. But yeah, that was the done thing at the time. It was only executed. And I suppose if you've got a lack of the bodies of executed criminals coming through the university doors, and also as well, and I hope I'm remembering this correctly, because I did do I did attend a lecture fleetingly at university about like body snatchers and stuff. Apparently some students had to get their own cadavers, so the university didn't supply them, so all these boys were going out trying to source bodies to dissect in class.
Horrific.
It's nasty. It's horrible. But you'll be pleased to know that the friends and relatives of Maggie ultimately won, and she was placed in a coffin to be transported back home to Musselburgh for burial. Maggie's come to a pretty sad end, and she's been through a traumatic time, and I highly doubt... I'd like to think that nothing untoward happened to the child, and I really don't think she would have gone to that extent to conceal it that much that she would have done anything rash. But I think reading the evidence, it's most likely that the child was stillborn, which is horrible. But the story doesn't stop there.
Oh, sugar.
Yeah. So on their way, the party of her friends and relatives paused for a drink at a roadside inn, possibly for like her wake type thing. Whilst in the inn, the lid of the coffin was seen to move, and there was a knocking heard from within.
Oh no.
When investigating, it was discovered that Maggie was very much alive.
What's she doing alive? What's...
I told you this story was bizarre.
Is this straight after the hanging?
So this is on the way back. The execution's been, she's now in the box and she's now going home.
God, now she's found herself in the box. She's going to be absolutely out of her box.
Alive.
Do you know what I mean?
Oh, God. She, herself, Maggie, took part in a beverage at her own wake and was well enough to walk the rest of the way to Musselburgh the next day.
Fantastic.
It's so weird. It's such a bizarre...
Stretch your legs, Maggie. She's had a hard time.
Exactly. She might have a slightly sore throat, but, it's such a weird story. So, having been faced with the perplexing case of a dead woman walking, the authorities debated over what exactly to do. Maggie had technically faced her punishment because she was hanged. A physician had deemed Maggie dead after the execution, and therefore there was no lawful grounds for a second attempt at hanging her. Her survival was seen to be God's will, and therefore she was free from any other conviction over the matter.
Lovely. I'm now thinking it's just as well she didn't get taken to the university, because that would have been a much worse way to wake up.
That would have been, thank God the friends and relatives got the uni students out the way, because that could have been one nasty ending for poor Maggie. After all this, Maggie lived for another 40 years. She remarried her husband because technically death had parted them and he had been a widower because she had been declared dead. And she...
Wait, is this the chap who went to Newcastle?
Yeah, so they ended up getting back together.
Oh, so we came back?
Yeah, they got back together. And they went on to have several children.
Oh, lovely.
Yeah, so she had a family in the end. It is also said that she prayed regularly, despite having not been particularly religious prior to this event, thanking for her survival. And Maggie died properly in 1765.
Well, that's quite the ride.
Yeah. So some say that as to how she managed to survive this execution, some say she had become a quote unquote good friend of the rope maker, and the early breaking of the rope guaranteed her survival. Some have also said that the sort of old wives' tale version of the story says that she wasn't properly dead, and when they were taking her back along the road in her coffin, they jolted over a hole in the road, and that was enough to revive her. And out of both of them, I really hope it's that one, because that would just... It's so weird.
I have visions of her going over the bump and then being like, oh, Jings, where am I? That's fun.
She's like, why is it dark in here? I mean, that's probably the more plausible one that she got round it, but who knows? So Maggie earned the nickname Half Hang't Maggie, hang it being the Scots word for hanged, as this is what the locals would call her, as she walked through the streets, and they refer to her as the woman who cheated the hangman's noose. She has since been immortalised through this tale of her execution, and writer and actress Gerda Stevenson devotes a poem to her called Half Hang't Maggie, and it's written in the Scots language, which we love. But we do. Fun fact, remember how we were talking about strange connections between episodes? Yes. So Gerda Stevenson was in a 1982 BBC Radio 4 adaptation of The Bride of Lammermoor.
Listen, the scariest thing to come out of this podcast so far is how we have done absolutely no forward planning in terms of what our episodes are going to be about. Mm-hmm. And for there to be so many strange connections really blows my mind.
It's really bizarre. It's honestly, hands down, totally unintentional that we keep coming across these really weird links between topics.
Except for me, who is doing a quartet of murders that I, honestly, from the get-go, we knew they were connected.
Yeah, that's fine.
But any additional connections, wild.
Yeah, that one was planned, but these random ones aren't. Maggie is perhaps best immortalised still to this day in Grassmarket through Maggie Dixon's Pub, which is a bar that overlooks her place of execution in Grassmarket. And it's still there.
That is probably why I know her name.
That is possibly why I know it, because it is quite a famous pub.
Yes, and I have spent a fair bit of time in the Grassmarket.
Yeah. So all that time, you were in Grassmarket, you're like, there was that whole tale as to the woman that cheated the system, quite literally.
Also, time. I'm surprised that I didn't know more about her, because Musselburgh is really only about 20 minutes away from my house.
Oh, I did not know that.
So I could probably walk to her do you know if she was buried in Musselburgh?
I'm presuming she was, if she went back there alive.
If she lived out the rest of her life there and is buried there, I would 100% go on a hunt for her gravestone.
You should go and have
if it exists.
Yeah, I would presume
I might look into that.
Yeah, but yeah, that is the bizarre tale of Half Hang't Maggie.
Oh well, that's lovely. The tale would have been much less interesting if she was the Fully Hang't.
The Fully Hang't
Maggie.
Exactly, because I mean, anyone listening to the story, you'd probably think it's going like the natural. Oh, she was done for infanticide. Infanticide, is that a word?
Infanticide.
Infanticide. That's the word.
It might not be.
You know what I mean.
I don't know what words are. So.
We do struggle with them sometimes. I just found the story borderline somewhat funny. There is a very sort of strange black comedy element to just the whole thing.
Well, it turns out okay. So it's almost...
Yeah.
You're kind of given permission to find some of it humorous because she ended up okay.
Exactly. It's just the thought that they're all sitting in the pub having a beer or an ale or whatever they drank in 17 whatever, and all of a sudden they just hear like
excuse me,
hello. Also, can you imagine how
do I smell gin?
Can you imagine how freaked out they'd been?
Yeah, I 100% would have run away, got 4 gallons of holy water, doused the coffin in it, set it alight, then realised actually water was a mistake because water's not very flammable. And then, I don't know, I would have maybe hacked the coffin to bits with an axe.
Yeah.
Because I'm not sure that I would have responded to that situation particularly well.
Yeah. Because it's the fact that she was like declared dead after her execution by like a physician. So how?
Yeah.
So because that's.
But that physician didn't get many other gigs.
Exactly.
After that. I'm assuming it was a he.
Oh, well,
terrible at his job.
It's hardly going to be a woman, is it? Come on, don't be silly.
Their responsibility was to stand at a loom,
and
to churn butter, and to have children.
There you go, the holy trinity of what women did in the 18th century.
Ah, yes.
Oh, God. But yeah, there's my story for you for this week. I hope you enjoyed.
Thank you very much. I did. Yeah, it's nice to hear something kind of local.
It's local. Yeah, local to you.
Well, this is the thing. Although I've lived in Glasgow for how long? 8 years?
Yeah.
Something like that. I do still feel very much like a country bumpkin from the East Coast.
Aww.
So it's nice to have been brought back to my home roots.
Exactly. It seems only fair. So there you go. I hope you enjoyed that.
Thank you very much. Well, should we just fire straight into mine?
Let's go. Let's do it. I'm very excited. Number 3 of 4.
Part 3 of the Quartet of Murders.
Yes.
So this one here is the story of Edward William Pritchard.
Oh, good name.
Excellent name. Very strong. 3 excellent.
Yeah, all very...
Edward, William, Pritchard. Yeah, it's nice. Although imagine if his name was Richard Pritchard. That'd be great. Anywho, so we're going to talk about Edward William Pritchard. He was born on the 6th of December 1825 in Southsea in Hampshire, England, UK, the world. So obviously not a Scot, but don't worry, he travels.
Okay.
So he was born into a naval family. His father was John White Pritchard, who was a sea captain.
Mm-hmm.
He seemed to have absolutely everything going for him. And his brother, I believe, followed in his father's footsteps. And it seemed that he was going to do the same. Was going to in some way end up in the kind of naval scene, shall we call it. His medical training began in Plymouth. He claimed to have studied at King's College Hospital in London and to have graduated from there in 1846. But there is absolutely no record of him having ever studied there.
Oh, inconvenient.
Yes. One of his main qualifications was delivered to him by post from a German university, which had no teaching involved at all. So,
right.
From the get-go, we're looking at Edward, we're thinking, you're a little bit of a liar.
Yeah, just a little bit.
Maybe his name isn't Edward William Pritchard. Perhaps he was born in 18 AD. Who knows? Because everything just seems a little fishy about Edward.
Yes.
He went on to serve in the Royal Navy as an assistant surgeon on the HMS Victory. Mm-hmm. And for 4 years, he served on various other ships sailing around the world. He went through Scandinavian waters, he went around Egypt, and he went to the Mediterranean. He saw it all.
Excellent.
Now, a wee description, just to plant the idea of what this man looked like.
Okay.
He was very tall.
Right.
Maybe by 1800 standards, I don't know particular measurements.
What was he, like 5 foot?
I mean, huge. So he was very tall. He had a slight stoop,
okay,
kind of hunch, a massive beard, a big forehead, and he was described as slightly effeminate.
Oh.
Which, mind your own business, who cares?
Yeah.
He opted for the timeless hairstyle, the comb over, to cover up for his ever-thinning hair. So he was pretty unforgettable because combining all of that with the fact that he was tall for the times made him stick out quite a bit.
Yeah.
So 5 years after serving in the Navy and on leave, he met a young Edinburgh woman at a ball in Portsmouth named Mary Jane Taylor, which I think is a really nice name.
That's a very pretty name.
Mary Jane. It was love at first sight. She came from a very, very well-off family, and her father was a retired silk merchant. Mm. So ding, ding, ding. Our Edward saw the money signs, went for it, loved him.
Classic.
Loved it.
Classic.
Yep. He was approved of greatly by Mary Jane's family, and in 1851, they married and whapped up a batch of 5 children.
Good for them.
Not all in 1851, I might add, because that would be
a miracle.
Busy year.
Yeah.
So our Edward, he was forever struggling financially and couldn't afford to set up a medical practice of his own, because back in those days you had to buy your way into a practice. But his wife's mother, whose name was Jane, so she was Jane Taylor, which I reckon is what Mary Jane is her namesake.
One would think.
You'd think. Jane gave him the money to ensure that he was able to buy himself into a practice, be around for his wife, and then also she really did think that he was an absolute idol. So step aside, Will Young. So within his medical practice, he became renowned as a womanizer. He was forever courting his female patients, and he also had a terrible problem with controlling his debts. He couldn't keep his debt under control. Hence why I said he had a problem controlling his debts. Anyways, at one point, his wife left for Edinburgh with their kids because she had a little bit of ill health.
Okay.
And he eventually followed suit. He sold his position in the practice in Portsmouth for £400, which is quite a lot, left his cloud of debt behind him and joined her in Edinburgh. But he really, really desperately wanted to move to Glasgow. Okay. And he wanted to start a working relationship with medical professionals in Glasgow. They were all really, really suspicious of him, and he was never fully able to break in with the doctors around Glasgow because they found his storytelling and his experience a little fishy. They didn't buy that it was all genuine.
Okay.
So they've come to Glasgow. They settle themselves in Berkeley Terrace, where he inevitably set up a practice. The beautiful gloss of his supposed impressive professional life wasn't the only thing that began to crack when he arrived in Glasgow.
Oh.
His marriage also began to show signs of some strain.
Oh dear.
Edward began a relationship with one of the house staff. This woman was called Elizabeth McGurn.
Okay.
And I was able to find somewhere that they think she was 22 at the time, but that can't confirm. So sadly, when he packed up to move to Glasgow, he also brought his infidel ways. He was ready to spread it about.
Ew. What a phrase.
I didn't enjoy that. That wasn't in the script. That was just what came out my mouth. Aside from his secret liaisons, he was still determined to ascend the career ladder. So he would write papers and reports for the Lancet, which is quite impressive. He was eventually appointed director of the Athenaeum, which was a fabulous achievement and earned him a great bit of respect within the medical sector. Okay, so he's gained some of this respect.
Yes.
Next paragraph. His need for constant attention showed how horrendously vain he was. He would go around the streets handing flyers out to people to try and convince them to move to his practice, but it was just a big flyer with his face all over it.
Are you kidding me?
So he really thought he was a hot slice. And I would tell you, if I was to cast this movie, also I got a little bit of flack last week because when I was trying to cast Old Fletcher in the story of last week.
Do you mean Old Fleming?
I said Fletcher, didn't I? I meant Fleming. I don't even know the names of people in my own stories. What use have I got coming to yours? Yes, so you may remember from the story last week, I tried to cast Old Fleming.
You did.
And I went with Rolf Harris.
You did.
And our friend Jen got in touch to tell me that she thought it was hilarious that I decided to cast an actual pervert instead of just choosing an actor who could do the job. Anywho, so I will use actors in this scenario.
Okay.
Probably wouldn't cast someone like Brad Pitt. I would probably cast... Okay, so I haven't gone with a real actor. I've gone with Rasputin because of the beard. He looks a bit like Rasputin from the animated Anastasia movie.
Oh, that's an unfortunate way to look.
I mean, he's not that bad. But he's bad enough. So, beyond handing out flyers of his very own face, he would host private lectures where he would tell stories of his incredible travels. He claimed to have hunted eagles in Arabia, lions in North America. His walking stick, he claimed, was presented to him by Garibaldi, the Italian nationalist. Now, it may not be pronounced Garibaldi, but that is a delicious biscuit. And I just thought I'd pronounce it like the biscuit.
Let's presume it's the biscuit.
Let's just presume it's the biscuit. There was an inscription on the stick, but it was decided eventually that they never actually met. He made that bit up.
Oh.
He was known for gilding the lily a wee bit.
Mm-hmm.
May 5th, 1863, things took a sinister turn.
Okay.
The affair with Elizabeth was ongoing while she was living in the attic of their house in Berkeley Terrace. That night, Mary Jane and another maid went out for the evening, and during the evening, 2 of his children ran to him while he was in bed, saying that the house was on fire.
Oh.
Upon investigating, he discovered the halls full of thick black smoke, and indeed the upper level of the house was ablaze. When the police came, Edward answered the door fully clothed, which is surprising considering that he had claimed to be in bed when alerted to the fire by his screaming sons.
Oh.
And I highly doubt he thought, Jings, my house is on fire, let me pop some proper clothes on. Because back in those days, they had loads of layers. The women would have more layers than the men.
That's
but
very
still,
true.
There was a theory. Because Elizabeth was known for being an avid reader, they thought that perhaps she'd gone to bed, read into the evening slightly later than she usually would, and fallen asleep, leaving her oil lamp on, and the curtains around her bed then went up in flames.
Oh.
And they also thought this was the case because the worst of the damage was around about her head, where she would be keeping a lamp so that she'd be able to read her book.
Oh.
So that's where it looked the worst. So they decided that was the main theory. However, we should note that no book was found near her.
Ah. Okay.
Her body was totally burnt. Her face was barely recognisable. One of her arms was so badly burnt that it had actually been burnt off entirely.
Ooh.
Yeah, her legs and some of her torso remained relatively unscathed because she had been wearing stockings in bed and she was covered with a blanket. Oh. But her little tootsie toes had also been burnt quite badly.
Oh, God.
Because they were sticking out the end.
Ugh.
So the circumstances were undoubtedly suspect.
Mm-hmm.
There was absolutely no struggle. There was no effort made by Elizabeth to get out of the room.
Okay.
It seemed that she was pretty peaceful, which is quite eerie. Folk began to speculate that she was... Bless you, Trixie just sneezed.
Oh,
Elizabeth... really cute. Folk began to speculate that she was perhaps dead before the fire started, or that she was drugged so deeply that she wouldn't awaken.
Oh.
But Edward insisted the fire was completely accidental, and the police agreed, dropping it all together, and it was wrapped up in a neat little bow and labelled merely tragic. It wasn't until subsequent events, which I will soon discuss, that people suspected he had something to do with the death. Okay.
Yes, because so far, it seems a little bit suspicious.
He tells lies, he's a big porky pig.
Yep.
He has a comb over.
Yep.
There's nothing to enjoy.
Yep. It's the fact that you said that she made no attempt to escape this fire.
Yes, that's very strange.
Very bizarre.
Especially if it started at her head.
You'd think you'd maybe notice.
You'd think. But they do believe that she inhaled a lot of smoke.
Okay.
This is what they came up with.
Yeah.
She inhaled so much smoke that she then passed out and died that way in the fire. But I would feel to die from smoke inhalation, she would have had at least have woken up and coughed a little bit.
Yeah.
Or at least moved uncomfortably in her sleep. I don't know. Okay, so after the family home was ravaged by flames, the Pritchard family moved house and ended up living on Sauchiehall Street. They lived at 131 Sauchiehall Street. And before, although I don't believe that exists anymore, I read one story that it has changed number. I think it's 249 Sauchiehall Street. But I also read another account saying that it no longer exists at all.
Oh, I wonder what...
But it may just be that 131 doesn't exist because it is now 249.
Yeah.
Sadly, before long, his wandering eye struck again.
There's the shock.
Mary MacLeod was a 15-year-old girl from Islay in Ireland, and she began working for the Pritchard family, and he combed his beard and popped his 3 hairs over the front of his head, combed them right over to make some sweet, sweet moves towards Mary.
Oh, God. Oh, poor Mary, don't do it. Don't, please.
Yeah. Save yourself, Mary. So on one known occasion, Edward was in fact caught by Mary Jane with the young girl. Oh. Now, last week we spoke about the Jess Jessie debacle.
Yes.
Welcome to this week's debacle of Mary Jane and Mary.
Okay, right. Again, I say with the 2 Victorian names things.
It never gets any better.
There was... Oh.
It also, there's 2 other characters in this story, but I don't talk about one of them. This is a side note. There is a doctor that I'll talk about whose last name was Peterson or Patterson. One of the other people who worked for the Pritchards was also called Peterson or Patterson.
Oh, for God's sake. It's so ridiculous.
I was like, this is so confusing. So I kept her out the story altogether just to keep things simple. It appeared at this stage when Mary Jane caught him with Mary that Mary was already pregnant.
Oh.
Edward came to the rescue. Don't you worry about it. He said he would sort it out. Side note, he also said to Mary that he would marry her if he were to outlive his wife.
I mean, that's no offer. Come on.
It's not the romantic proposal that I expect.
No.
By sorting it out, Edward decided he was going to utilise some of his medical knowledge, be that real or be it not.
Oh,
and he was going to attempt a termination himself.
Oh.
Luckily for Mary, despite how fake his medical knowledge may be,
yes,
she did seem to get through the operation absolutely fine, and no one was the wiser.
Right, okay.
Strangely, Mary Jane seemed pretty tolerant of her husband's wandering hands. Mary even offered to leave, but Mary Jane was herself so fond of her that she convinced her to stick around.
Mm-hmm.
So despite the raging jealousy, she said that all that her and Edward had to do was maintain the facade of a happy marriage.
Right, okay.
But because of the times we're in, there's a high chance that she stuck around because she relied on him financially.
Yes.
And for the benefit of her and her 5 children, she decided to stick around.
Okay.
As well as being the best, most reliable husband, Edward was the only GP to attend to the entire family. And following the affair with young Mary, Mary Jane began to fall ill with what he called gastric problems, which would worsen tenfold whenever she drank or ate.
Okay, slightly dodgy.
Slightly dodgy, but Edward insisted it was just gastric fever.
Because, he's the world's best doctor.
He absolutely is. He did get other doctors to chime in, so they came to check up on her.
Okay.
And at this time, doctors were trusted beyond belief, so folk would do absolutely anything that was recommended if it was going to make them feel better.
Right, okay.
So she would take all the strange recommendations that they offered, including champagne and ice, which was one of the most elite doctors. Told her to have that.
Who knew that could cure most ills?
I didn't.
No. Maybe we're missing a trick somewhere.
So maybe we should start trying that again.
There we go.
Next time you've got a sore head, pop a wee champagne. So now it's time to tell you that in November,
okay,
tartarized antimony was purchased. This is something that was used by the ancient Greeks. It's been used for a very long time.
Okay.
But the metallic element within the tartarized antimony is highly toxic.
Yeah.
And he also got a vegetable substance called aconite, which is an excellent homeopathic remedy to treat fright and trauma.
Oh God.
So let me just summarize what I tried to say.
Okay.
So aconite was used to calm people down when diluted by about 1,000 times.
Right.
It's used even now to treat things like anxiety and trauma.
Fun fact.
But giving a grain of the stuff undiluted would be incredibly toxic.
I mean, as goes for most things in the Victorian era, to be fair. Most things would kill you
So
eventually.
Yeah, the life expectancy was not up to par.
You've got mercury in hats. Women were putting toxic substances on their face.
We need to bring that back, actually.
What?
Just kidding. Just kidding. Yeah, no, it wasn't a good time for your general well-being.
No, there was quite a lot of risks.
Mary Jane, thankfully, never twigged what was going on to her health. Well, I say thankfully. I feel like I say thankfully so that she didn't know her husband was an awful human being.
Yeah.
But it would have been nice if she twigged. But she was ill for quite a substantial period of time.
Mm-hmm.
At one point, her brother recommended that she goes back to Edinburgh for a break because her family both lived there. Her parents both lived there, I mean.
Mm-hmm.
When there, with her mother and father, she improved very quickly and drastically, returning to Glasgow only once she had essentially full health again.
Okay.
While she's there, unaccompanied, she becomes well.
Funny that. Now, surely that cannot be a coincidence.
You wouldn't think. Oh. Well, here we go.
Oh.
When she returned, they had an excellent, healthy Christmas together. But sadly, Edward had bought even more poison.
Oh.
So when New Year came, Mary Jane once again became incredibly ill because Edward was giving her regular doses of the poison. He did it very gradually so not to draw attention to the problem. Things worsened and worsened and worsened. What a man. Eventually, Mary Jane's feisty 70-year-old mother joins to help look after her.
Mm-hmm.
She had, sadly, herself, she had a mad opium addiction.
Because
she used to treat... Yeah, exactly. She used it to treat neuralgia headaches, but she did become addicted.
Oh.
So she used to take quite a number of doses to keep herself going throughout the day, and it kept her spirits up.
Well, if it got her through, fair enough.
Edward insisted that he would keep her supply totted up and subsequently would reduce the cost by getting her top-ups from his chemist, though obviously because he is a sinister evil man, he added aconite to the dose. And this was later confirmed by pharmacists. He would go to pharmacy to get the poisons to give to Mary Jane, but also would lace the opium with little doses of the poison too, just to kind of take Mrs. Taylor's feisty edge off. I read that she was feisty, but there's nothing to say what she did that made her feisty, but she just sounds like a bit of a character.
She sounds like, anyone with an opium addiction probably is a bit. Yeah.
Mrs. Taylor believed that she had the same affliction as her daughter, which was what she believed to be gastric flu because of the diagnosis that Mary Jane had received. No solutions and no remedies ever came to the rescue. A neighbour named Dr. Flip. Here was me saying that it was Patterson or Peterson, and there's a typo so that the first vowel of the name isn't there. It is Patterson. I have scrolled.
Patterson.
A neighbour named Dr. Patterson came to check them out to find out what was wrong, to give his opinion. He had absolutely no answers. He wasn't sure that he could confirm the diagnosis of gastric flu either.
Okay.
So he couldn't diagnose them, but he also didn't agree with Dr. Pritchard. The 13th of February, Mary felt well enough for tapioca pudding.
Oh.
Yum, yum. So the kids were sent out to fetch some. Once they'd got it, they brought it back to the house and left it in the hall prior to being cooked up in the kitchen. The hallway was next to Dr. Pritchard's surgery door.
Right.
Bad times. He told the cooks that his wife would sweeten the tapioca herself, so to not add any sugar. He offered to take it to her like a good loving husband, and went via the dining room to fetch a lump of sugar, which went past his consulting room, and on his way dropped a little bit of antimony. A little drop of antimony, mixed it into the tapioca with the sugar. Do you follow?
Do I follow? Is that what your question was? I do follow, and this man is a bad man.
Well, I don't know if their house is just is a bit of a labyrinth, but talking about going via places, this house sounds massive.
Also, how did nobody notice that he was going in and out of rooms?
Yeah, it's like, excuse me, the tapioca's going to get cold.
Exactly.
Can you please calm yourself down? Sadly, because Dr. Pritchard took such a long way to get to the sugar to get to his wife, she'd gone off the tapioca pudding idea by the time it got to her. So she decided not to eat it.
I mean, possibly the wisest idea she had was not to eat that pudding.
Yes, but guess who did eat it?
Oh no, who did eat it?
Her mum.
Oh.
And she promptly became very, very ill. Edward spent all of this time keeping up the appearance of a doting, loving husband by delivering food to his poorly wife, but he had been secreting small doses of poisons to every single thing that she ate and drank. Only this time, the plan didn't work out perfectly because he had accidentally poisoned his mother-in-law. 24th of February, Mrs. Taylor. I'm calling her Mrs. Taylor so we don't get confused between Mary Jane, and Jane. So Mrs. Taylor was found unconscious in a chair next to her daughter's bed.
Okay.
When Mary Jane begged her husband to help, he said there was nothing he could do to assist a dead woman, even though she was clearly not yet dead, though inevitably she did die. Edward recorded in his diary that he could not define when she died. Her features were so finely drawn when he had seen her, but on her death certificate, he said the cause was paralysis and apoplexy.
Right.
Dr. Patterson from next door came through to do another kind of analysis of the situation, and he decided that he could not in good conscience sign the death certificate with a clear conscience. Said that twice. So he left the signature strip blank because he couldn't do it.
Right, okay.
He handed it into the registrar to register the death of Mrs. Taylor, but he left a note of concern stating that he didn't believe that she had died naturally. Sadly, the registrar did absolutely nothing with that note. He just completely ignored it.
Okay.
Sadly, Mary Jane was too ill to attend her mother's funeral.
That's horrible.
I know. I mean, she must have been so poorly. She'd have to go to Edinburgh because I reckon that's where the body was taken, but awful. From here, the affair with Mary MacLeod continued on. He gave her presents, including a beautiful brooch. He reported to his father-in-law that his daughter was too ill to write to him, and he continued to purchase poisons from Sauchiehall Street Chemist.
Did nobody in the chemist think to go, this doctor's been buying an awful lot of things that could be used as a poison? This is a bit weird.
Well, you'd think, but then also I feel so many poisons when used in really small doses were used to treat stuff.
True. But
the chemist would be none the wiser.
Yeah.
But maybe the frequency at which he attended to buy the stuff. But then maybe they just thought that he had a particularly busy practice, surgery.
That's a very good point. Yeah.
Could be that.
Because, he was the best doctor in the world.
He was the best doctor in the world. That's going to be the opening number of the musical I'm writing about this story. 17th of March, Dr. Patterson was called once again. Mary Jane was hallucinating and was in some great deal of distress. She was prescribed chlorodyne, ipecacuanha. I'll tell you what it did as opposed to telling you what it was. It was used as an antiemetic.
Okay.
She was given morphine and she was given cinnamon water. Yum, yum.
Ooh.
Edward appeared incredibly sympathetic and begged Mary not to leave him. So, put on a display of sadness. However, despite his empty pleas, Mary Jane finally died. Gave a very convincing demonstration of grief. He was absolutely hysterical and gave Meryl Streep a run for her money.
Oh.
Oh, yes.
Oh, he was pulling out the big guns for that one then.
Dr. Patterson was still very suspicious and decided not to alert authorities in person, which I think is a little bit strange. Why he didn't alert them, do not know. He could have helped much sooner, but he decided not to.
Excellent.
Instead, he opted to write an anonymous letter to the Procurator Fiscal reporting the odd deaths of both Mary Jane and her mother under the care of Dr. Pritchard. And I do have a little book next to me, and I'm going to read you a quote.
Oh.
In his Blackwood's Shilling scribbling diary, don't know why it's so specific about the brand of diary.
There we go.
On March 18th, 1865, Dr. Pritchard wrote this. Died here at 1 a.m. Mary Jane, my own beloved wife, aged 38 years. No torment surrounded her bedside, but like a calm, peaceful Lamb of God, passed many away. May God and Jesus, holy and I'm saying holy because it does just have holy GH. I'm assuming he just abbreviated ghost.
Oh, yes.
So may God and Jesus, Holy Ghost, 1 in 3, welcome many. Prayer on prayer till mine be o'er, everlasting love, save us, Lord, for they dear Son. The grammar of that's not great, but also he even went to his private diary and kept up the pretense of being devastated.
Oh, dear.
The sign of a true psychopath. And I also may take a photo of this other thing in this book, which is the letter written by Dr. Patterson.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah.
Very cool.
Do that.
And in true Doctor fashion, the writing is truly illegible. Cannot make out a single word apart from maybe sir.
Yeah.
Anywho, so let's pop on over to Edinburgh for the funeral.
Why not?
Mary Jane, yes, why not? Mary Jane was in her casket in her father's house. He now has no wife. He's lost one of his daughters. I say one of, don't know if he has more. When out of nowhere, Edward demanded that he see her one last time. To the horror of everybody present at the funeral, he opened the lid and visibly wept real tears and kissed his wife repeatedly. Which is disgusting. But also, this is where he gets his nickname, which I shall now reveal to you. Dr. Pritchard's nickname is the Human Crocodile. Because crocodiles are known for appearing to shed tears when they eat their prey.
Yes.
And because nobody believes his tales, and he is subsequently found to have done this whole thing, they realised that his tears were all artificial, so he was dubbed the Human Crocodile.
Oh, that's very interesting.
Yeah.
Also sounds like it should be an act in a Victorian freak show that should be appearing alongside the Elephant Man, because it definitely sounds like that kind of title. He
perhaps should have given up his dreams of being a doctor and also gone into acting, much like myself.
Yeah.
Because he seems to have the ability to cry on cue.
I mean, he's doing
quite a skill.
He's doing a very much an Oscar-worthy performance of pretending to care for his dead wife and mother-in-law.
Well, let me tell you, he recovered from his grief pretty quickly.
Oh, there's a shock.
Because he popped on the train home to Glasgow, and while on the train, he took time to talk to a stranger to whom he provided one of his headshots that he would pass about, one of his little slips of paper advertising his medical practice. But thankfully, when the train pulled up into Queen Street Station in Glasgow, he was arrested.
Yay!
Fantastic news.
Woohoo!
The trial of a medical professional poisoning his wife and mother-in-law was of huge interest to the public.
Oh, I can imagine.
He pled not guilty. Of course, he pled not guilty, despite the forensic results being utterly against him. Antimony was very much present in all of his wife's organs when the autopsy was conducted, so it was very clear that he had been poisoning her this entire time.
Did he forget that they would do that bit? Did he forget that a post-mortem was a thing?
For a doctor, he's maybe just a bit thick.
Yeah. We don't even know if he's really a doctor.
This is true. He was actually a crocodile.
He was really a crocodile.
With the evidence being completely circumstantial, the role of the defence became casting doubts on the jury.
Okay.
Or to present everything to try and make the jury doubt the prosecution's stance. So he would push the idea that he was a medical man of good character.
Okay.
At the end, though, it took 55 minutes for the jury to unanimously decide that he was guilty. And so clearly the jury didn't buy any of the rubbish.
Well done, jury.
That was being presented to them. Thank you, jury. Probably all men.
Yes, very probably.
Ever the actor, Edward couldn't just walk out of the courtroom like a good little criminal. He ended the trial with a theatrical bow to court.
Oh, for God's sake.
Which, to be honest, I probably would as well. I'd do the most dramatic bow you've ever seen in your life. In fact, I'd probably swing down from a chandelier. And
of course you would.
Do something like
I
that.
would approve of that.
Yep.
I'd approve of that act.
Thank you. Let us briefly turn to Mary McLeod. She is...
Ah, yes.
Let's not forget about her. People were suspicious of her, and some people believed that perhaps Mary was involved in trying to bump off his wife and the family so that she could eventually take her place. But the jury was not convinced, and the doctor received all blame.
Yep.
So Mary, that was her, forgotten about. After seeing several ministers of the church, he saw about 3 or 4, he wrote 4 full confessions to the murders.
Mm-hmm.
But the confessions themselves, as is his kind of trademark, they were full of lie. But in the end, he did essentially admit guilt and made peace with God via these ministers.
Right.
On the day of his execution, Glasgow came to a complete standstill. 100,000 people attended the execution July 28th, 1865, at the Salt Market end of Glasgow Green. And it was the last public hanging in Scotland.
Oh.
Yeah.
That's a fun fact.
Also, another fun fact is that when he was hanged, there was no curtain around the bottom of underneath the trapdoor. So when he dropped, everybody could see it happen.
Oh.
And also his executioner, whose name has completely escaped me, he was one of the longest serving executioners in the UK, and he had travelled up to Scotland to only do 2 executions. He did one in Perth and he did one in Glasgow, which is this one.
Yeah.
And he was known for having particularly short ropes. So his victims would drop, and then it wasn't the drop that would kill them. It was a case of being strangled.
Oh.
To death.
That's
so
sadistic.
With the really sadistic. So with the curtain not being there, everyone essentially just watched Edward dangle there for who knows how long. But I've heard stories of things taking as long as 10 minutes for people to eventually die from just hanging.
Nasty.
Hanging there. Also, this executioner would sell pies.
What?
So he'd at the executions, before the execution happened, he'd have a little stall and he'd sell stuff. I love that.
Now, what were these pies made from though? Executioner selling pies? This is slightly...
It is very fishy.
It sounds like another story.
It took me so long to say something because I was trying to bite my tongue from not singing anything from Sweeney Todd. Because you know me, I will take any opportunity to sing a song. So anyway, rounding things up, did he kill just the 2 people? And was he just a double murderer, or did he also kill Elizabeth in the attic? So, which would make him essentially a serial killer?
Oh.
Or did he have even more victims than that? Did he poison patients? Who knows? And that's the story of Dr. Edward William Pritchard.
That's a very, very good story. I definitely didn't know. Definitely didn't know that one.
I honestly just feel when I do my internet research, at the very, very beginning of some of the research for these cases, I find so little.
Yeah.
And then once we finish an episode, I'm like, wow, I had so much stuff to say. And also, this book that I'm reading, which I can't tell you the title of, is packed of such good information. I didn't even get to any of the court case in this book. All the court case stuff was stuff online, but there's so much more for me to read in this book. I just didn't have time to finish it.
That's so good.
Yeah, it's so great. Love it. Anyway, so that is the story.
That's an excellent... he just sounds like a bad person.
A very bad person. I think the theme that ties all these things together is that they're all just bad people.
They are just bad people because he was a serial liar. He had affairs and just started killing people. It's just...
Yeah, it's sadistic. And the fact he had 5 children in the house where he was poisoning his wife.
Did he confess to why he did it?
So there were various theories. And actually, if I go to my book, in my book here, there is a list of 6 main reasons for murder.
Okay.
So they are murder for gain, murder for revenge, murder for elimination, murder from jealousy, from lust of killing, and from conviction. But it says William Roughhead adds a number 7, which is murder for fun. So he lists fun-loving killers, Jack the Ripper, John Watson Laurie, Madeline Smith, weirdly enough, is in there.
Oh.
And Dr. Pritchard. And they've also used a different term for it, which is murder for pleasure. So the theory is that Dr. Pritchard committed at least 3 murders and that he got pleasure from out of all of them. And there was certainly no other motive worth naming.
Ugh. So he was just a psychopath then, really.
He was just a bad person who it seemed enjoyed killing.
Ugh. Somewhat the opposite of what a doctor's supposed to do with their life.
Do you know what I mean?
Just saying.
So he was potentially one of the first angels of death.
Oh.
Although a lot of angels of death, their whole thing is that they think they're helping in a sense.
Yeah. Yeah, he wasn't helping the situation.
Yeah. Or they are in some way euthanizing without permission.
Yeah.
If you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Whereas this was a case of he was making his wife very, very sick for a very long time.
That's just awful. If he just
felt nothing.
If he didn't want to be with it anymore, why didn't he just leave?
Yeah, I mean, she was fine with the whole Mary setup.
Exactly. Just like, I'm sure she probably would have appreciated it if he had just left, to be honest.
Yeah, probably.
She's been like, I feel great now that he's gone. Because he stopped putting poisonous substances into my puddings.
Which is not, I much prefer pears or, like if I was to have, I mean, I don't have tapioca ever really.
No.
But if I was to have like a rice pudding, much prefer a mandarin segment.
I think as well about that case, it's just very weird about the fire in the attic.
Yeah.
And how it's never really like spoken about again.
I just find it so strange that the police were encouraged to reinvestigate.
Yeah.
And their stance was, we have investigated and we agree with Dr. Pritchard.
See.
So there was an outcry for them to look into it again, and they just never did. So it's not until he's been convicted of 2 other murders that people have thought, oh, well, actually, maybe he was responsible for that.
Can you imagine them just all sitting around going, oh, whoops, maybe we should have.
Cover-ups in the police?
Yeah, surely not. But yeah.
Oh my God, Scottish police, don't come for me.
No.
I'm sure it's all fine now.
But just, it's like last week's story about the pervy Fleming man. Like, that was all rich men telling the police, oh no, it's fine, this happened. And then that's another time that it's happened. At roughly the same time.
Yeah, it just seemed to be, it was the end thing.
Yeah.
Well, there we are.
Excellent. Thank you for that. I enjoyed that immensely.
Not a problem. I've only got one more and then I'm going to get to dip my toes into something else. Something new and exciting.
Exciting. I wonder what you're going to go for first.
I have a feeling I know what I'm going to do next.
Yay. No, that's
but I'm not going to tell you. So yes, anywho. That is us done for another week.
Yay.
So we will get this episode up on Friday as per usual. Midnight on Friday. We try and get the episodes out. And it will be available on... Well, you'll know where it's available because you've got it. I don't know. If you enjoyed it, do feel free to subscribe and like and comment. Email us.
Yes, please do. Because as always, we do love hearing from you. And yeah, thank you again for all your support so far. We will never stop saying this because each time I log in and have a look at our numbers and like see that people actually are listening to us, it blows my mind every single time that people care enough.
It is very exciting. Yeah, this was just something that we discussed very briefly. I've wanted to start a podcast for a very long time, and Hannah was just keen to help me make my dreams come true.
Aww.
And so we just discussed it over lockdown, and then we made it happen. So the fact that other people are now a part of this thing that we just kind of discussed a little bit over lockdown is really fun.
I suppose it is kind of our lockdown project in a way.
Yeah, but we will continue for as long as people want to listen. So we need to know that you actually want to listen. You see, you need to comment, like, subscribe, share, all those things, because otherwise we're going to stop and it's your fault.
Exactly. So. And we will never forgive you. Joking, we will. Because we're nice people.
I will. No, I hold a grudge.
Was that gothic?
A wee bit.